Okay, now we're going to open up for questions. Let's try to go one question per person until we make it all the way around. Everyone has a chance to ask a question, and then we can go back for a second question. So who'd like to start?
I had a question. Back to the DNA experiments, I was just wondering how the DNA was being observed. How was it being recorded?
And I think they were using a special type of laser technology to record.
Were there observers or were there scientists there? Did they know what stimuli was being presented to the subject?
If you're relating to the DNA experiment,
yeah.
There was a laser, it's a type of laser, sophisticated laser technology, which is used to map the photons, from my understanding.
So just technical equipment, no people observing in real time what was happening?
Good question. Perhaps not. But what we do know from a double slit experiment, this is an interesting, were people observing, is that just by the actors observing, we have the power to change a particle from a wave to a particle wave. So if you're observing something, you actually affect the way that particle is behaving.
Yeah, I was just wondering, was the DNA affected by the observer or the subject?
It's a good question. Very good question.
And is it specific to the DNA that the photons keep the same shape as the DNA? Is that true with other objects or just DNA?
As far as I know, it's just from the DNA tested. I mean,
if you put like a mushroom in there, you make a light mushroom.
Possibly. I don't think so. I think it's just
something special about DNA.
Yeah, it's something special about DNA. Other experiments have been related to DNA from another Russian scientist called, he's got a funny, Gorviov and his team. He's one of the leading Russian scientists in the world, and he brought a team of linguists, psychologists, mathematicians, etc., and microbiologists to look at the junk DNA, the so-called junk DNA that's been written off by Western scientists as junk. And they said, is it really junk? And what they found out, that it's not actually really junk. It's within those are strands and information that acts very similar to what linguists call syntax, which is the structure of language. So what it's intimating is that language is in some way encoded within the DNA, or structures similar types of patterns anyway. And moreover, what that Russian scientist did was that he took again the laser and he changed the wave of the DNA, and the DNA changed as well. He took patterns and then encoded that into the laser, and then the DNA was able to change. So what we're looking at with DNA is it's a kind of he called it a kind of evolving internet database of information that reacts to stimuli.
You know your rice experiment?
Yeah.
Was that mould in there?
There was a tiny bit of mould when I...
Surely the mould should be in the one that you give love to, because then it will grow more mould.
Well, possibly. I'll tell you what I did. What you can't see from that is the one on the left stank more than the one on the right.
Well, I'd done that experiment before with a class of children.
Yeah.
And I had 2 plant pots with seeds in exactly the same pot, exactly the same seeds. And do a happy face and an angry face, or a sad face. And just every morning did exactly the same to the kids, like said, cuss this one, and praise this one. And then literally, the one that was praised grew nice and strong and tall, like this big, and the other one was just like a little stub.
There you go.
And that could have been a coincidence, but as you say, it's so many people do it. You know?
So many people on YouTube. Yeah, I'll invite anyone to.
And like I'd say everyone do it themselves. You know?
Yeah, wow, that's
like that. Cleve Baxter guy has got results of plants actually picking up on human intentions, right?
Wow.
Yeah. Plants.
So the first part of your speech was about DNA, right? I remember talking to one of our speakers that we had before. His name's Andrew Kushner. Do you know him?
No, I'm not familiar.
Anyway, At one point, he walked up to me and asked me kind of what I thought was kind of a funny question. But he wanted my opinion, and I didn't really give him a good answer. But he wanted my opinion on can DNA be affected, you know, in our bodies, or is it only affected when they're, you know, when a baby is formed, when the cells are splitting or whatever, when the cells are combining and then splitting. So there are at least two different theories. There's one that says, you know, the only way that DNA can change or there can be any mutations is, you know, besides using radioactivity, it's just the old traditional way, or there's kind of what you're talking about, which is being able to affect DNA just while it's in your body. Do you know the names of those two theories?
I don't know.
Epigenetics is the environment affecting your genetics.
Yeah, there is epigenetics. And the other one I'm not sure about.
We just call it traditional?
Traditional, yeah. I mean, classical mechanical sort of theories about... Yeah, I mean, let's go back to the rat experiment. Classical genetic theory would not allow for the rats to learn to things, for the parents to learn things from the children, for example. It just, or intergeneration, it wouldn't, to learn how to go to the right exit. It's something that wouldn't be accepted. But according to the results, that's what happened.
So the one where the DNA can be affected throughout your lifetime is called epigenetics. Okay, thanks. More questions?
Yeah, have you heard of the Randy Prize? The Randy Foundation Prize?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
He was a famous magician, and he put $1 million down for anyone to be able to prove a single psychic feat under, I think he said, reasonable experimental conditions.
Oh yeah,
it was maybe 20 years ago.
The bald guy.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Whereas his trousers ridiculously high.
I know. Yes.
Yeah, it was like 20 years ago. Nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, Sheldrake talked.
Yeah, Sheldrake talked about that, and I think from what I can remember, let's compare your guy and let's compare Dr. Sheldrake, who I've been talking about.
I'm a big fan of Sheldrake.
Yeah.
As well, yeah.
Well, Sheldrake doesn't think that what did Roberts? He said about him that he was a fraud.
Sure.
Because he basically manipulated some data that Robert Sheldrake put, and he adapted it to make it not provable, and then he put it in a magazine to make money or whatever. And also, this guy Brandy is not a scientist. Okay, he doesn't do scientific research, and he doesn't follow specific measures, and his parameters aren't particularly, according to Dr. Robert Sheldrake, scientific. So on that basis, I think that's enough to say about it. But it's always good to have skeptics, but the problem is that it's very fashionable to be a skeptic. You know, in America, there's about 100,000 skeptics, but there's only about 6, you know, meaningful researchers, you know, within. Why don't those skeptics go out and do some meaningful research, and instead of, you know, and they'll always find an answer. They'll always find an answer, even if they replicate exactly the same results as they were thinking were not possible. Okay, let's have a look at this one. This is Dr. Rupert Sheldrake's research, and then the skeptic decided to, thinking, well, those parameters are right, that's just a fluke, that's part of coincidence. He then repeated it, and he got almost exactly the same results. So I don't know what to say. I mean, it's we need more research. We need to be more open-minded. Scientists need to get out of these dogmas of You know, there's constants out there that they can't be changed. You can't go and need to sort of be more open-minded to the fact that we don't know everything.
Well, in fairness, just as a response to that, the entire history of science has been the crumbling of dogma. So when relativity first came around, you mentioned the speed of light being a constant, especially in general relativity. That was laughed at and that was thought ridiculous. But then experimental data showed up a bit later and the math held together. And now we accept it as a fact. But there doesn't yet appear to be much replicatable data as far as psychic phenomena go. I don't know much about this. I just mean generally in like.
I've just shown you thousands and thousands
yeah.
of like statistically significant information. And this isn't just one study I'm showing you.
Yeah.
I could show you loads and loads. Like I'm showing you here. I'm showing you a lot of these graphs are like from how many studies? You know, hundreds or even thousands of studies. So there is the whole point of this. There is statistically significant information done under scientific conditions.
Okay.
So on this point, I disagree.
Okay.
Well, I think the history has always been replacing different paradigms, and I think we still think of the world in terms of a Newtonian paradigm of like bowling balls or like a billiard balls smashing each other together. When actually some of the, especially the double slit and the quantum stuff, seems to indicate that there is randomness and quantum physics. It's almost like we haven't really caught up with our science yet, the popular way of thinking.
We haven't. But I would agree with you in terms of we need dogmas to move forward. And but yeah, like your point with the speed of light, it's now been proven through quantum entanglement that there are things that go faster than the speed of light. It's now proven.
It's like
yeah, for sure, we know that. But in fairness, with the double slit experiment, all we've proven with that is that when you observe the experiment, it changes the outcome. It's not human observation, it's just interfering with the experiment. We don't know it's the act of consciousness. We don't know it's the act of being observed. We just know that if you interfere with the experiment, it changes the outcome. But that's the nature of quantum mechanics. That's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, right?
Yeah.
When you try to interact with something, it changes.
It changes,
but
yes.
it isn't with the double slit experiment particularly. It isn't the commentary on consciousness. We don't know that yet. It's just the commentary on the fact that you can't observe it scientifically without changing it.
Exactly.
But it's kind of been stolen by the New Age movement to say, hey, this is proof that if you have a person in the room actually watching an experiment, it changes it. That's not at all what's happened with, like...
I've heard that you get the results from the detectors, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you do the experiment 100 times, okay, and you record the experiment from the detector and from the screen at the back, and you close up them all and put them in an envelope, and put them away, leave it for like a year or so, and then you open up experiment 1, the data from the detector, and then from the screen at the end, and then you know what the detector data is, right? So therefore you get 2 bands. And you do that with the last one. You open the detector data, you get 2 bands, and then you throw away all the data, all of the detector data from the ones in the middle, and then you open it up, and it's all like interference patterns. Yeah, so it seems that it's not actually the detector that's doing it. It is actually some kind of like consciousness.
Yeah.
Which is very, very confusing.
Quantum entanglement actually has been proven now.
Quantum entanglement?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's been proven. They prove the maths of the quantum mechanics is actually right. Entanglement is real. They built a machine from Bohm's maths. From a guy called Bell. They built a machine, they tested it, it's provable. Quantum entanglement happens, which means that you don't need distance, it passes space and time. So you can however far you move a photon, if you split it in half, if they've been entangled, if you do that to the proton, it's going to affect exactly the same time. And now they're doing practical applications now for quantum cryptography, where they're doing security systems, etc. And there's many more applications which are coming down, which could be coming down in the future.
Okay, other questions? Who's got another question?
I have one question. I don't know how to formulate it though, but I will start slowly. Like, you made the experiment with the rice.
Yeah.
And you obviously, let's say you didn't quite succeed. this experiment was not quite successful, let's say.
Let's say I needed more time.
Yeah, okay. So maybe have you tried again?
What I could do is I could keep it,
Well,
and then
okay.
I could post it on YouTube
Yeah.
later, which
Okay,
might
that
be
was not-
interesting.
That was
And
not
again,
the
it's
question.
really not very scientific. It's just out of pure curiosity. But sorry.
But obviously, these experiments you showed us were successful, and I guess there are a lot of people who made similar experiments and they didn't come to the same results. I guess that's why you didn't present them. But anyway, how about like
Well, in terms of the rice experiments,
or any others? Let's say like you presented experiments with monkeys and rats and
yeah.
but so how come like and the people who are expecting phone calls, right? How come, for example, we cannot do it consciously? That like, for example, when the phone rang and we suddenly thought of the person, or we thought about the person before the phone rang, we didn't expect that the phone will ring. But how come we cannot actually control that? Like, say like, okay, now I want to receive a phone call from my girlfriend, you know,
Yeah.
but maybe I will, because she will obviously call me very often. But let's say now I want to receive a phone call from my ex-girlfriend, you know, which I haven't seen her for a long time. So, and I think about it, and she will never call me, I guess. So, how do you explain that sometimes we can do that, sometimes we cannot? Or, to be more precise, like the experiments with the monkeys, which you mentioned. Like, how about people? I know people who have 2 cats or 2 dogs. That they can be very different, and like the one doesn't influence the other. Like one cat can be very, very shy, and another cat can be very hostile. You know, why don't they influence each other? So, or
I don't
do you
have all the
understand my
answers.
question?
I definitely don't have all the
But
answers,
you
nor
know
does
about better
science. I definitely don't. But it's a work in progress. This consciousness is actually really not very well, according to Dr. Robert Shelley, it's not very well understood really. So we still don't know whether consciousness is held within our, as a mechanist reductionist view, is held within our brain. That what we're seeing is just all within our brain, and or are we lumbering robots as one Richard Dawkins mentioned, or are we something else more participatory? How can we not control it? I don't know. Is it quite a simple answer?
I have something to add. What you just said, and I was kind of waiting for you to say that, because now I think we've moved on to the second part of your speech about consciousness. I really, a lot of people like Rupert Sheldrake, the way he describes it, kind of like a radio receiver or a TV receiver. I like that. Now, I'm going to talk about something different. A lot of traditional scientists, or say biologists, would say that consciousness is a byproduct of just your brain. But recently I've been reading some studies about that a big part of consciousness actually lies in your intestines, in your gut, from the bacteria and all of the nerve endings in there. So it's almost as if no longer can even the reductionists say it's all in, say, quote unquote, one's head.
Okay, interesting. There's it's a very sorry.
No, carry on. Sorry.
It's a very big topic, and that'll be interesting to say there. I mean, Ewan just said that's why in the ancients maybe they read the entrails of sheep or whatnot to get
And
some.
you're saying about the heart and the Heart Math Institute, and the heart's like creates a lot of. Also, I've heard of things like, obviously it's anecdotal, so I don't know if it's true or not, but people having heart transplants and then becoming like an amazing artist, just like the person whose heart it used to belong to.
Interesting, yeah. There's definitely
More than like one, you know.
anecdotal sort of stories about that, where people like this health freak woman had a heart transplant, and then this guy who was like a motorbiker, and this woman was really into her health food and stuff, and she had this heart transplant. So I want a KFC, and she would never eat KFC in her life. So.
Okay, other questions?
Just your thoughts on there's a popular series, The Secret and the Power, about positive thinking.
Yeah.
And wondering if you have any thoughts on that, because I read 2 of them and they definitely changed my way of thinking, and I wonder if you have any comments.
Well, I think Greg Braden talks I believe he was an astrophysicist, but he was talking about the connection between intention, your heart, your emotion, and the result. And he looked at the particles as waves of energy, and if the heart is a wave of energy giving off this wave, the heart is actually the most powerful magnetic and electrical organ in your body. It's far more powerful than the brain. Many, I believe 100 times, don't quote me on that, more powerful than the brain, especially magnetically. So we know that and what he says is, if you have the intention and the emotion, that's the entanglement there, and that will create what you want into the world. And he gave that example, I don't know if you've seen it on TV, with the Chinese hospital, alternative hospital, where he said, oh look, she believes it, and the intention is there, the heart is there, and they all believe it, and you know, the tumour, and it was under an X-ray and it was being filmed, started to disappear. Again, more research needs to be done. We can't prove one way or another, but actually the physics, the recent discoveries could be supporting that notion.